Good morning. I assume my audio is good. Welcome to this first ever Thai Media Fund Forum. I'm here to talk about a little bit about how Thailand can reach the world audience with their cultural ideas and their values and their style. It's been a challenge. It's always been a challenge for a country to export their intellectual property to another country and have it be recognized and understood, because there's often very specific things that we see culturally that just do not travel. But with the rise of social media in the last 20 years and global social media, I think a lot of those barriers are starting to come down, in that not only does Thai audience have a chance to look at what content is in other parts of the world, but the other parts of the world get a chance to see what Thai content is about. So it starts, we start coming up with a common ground of ideas and thoughts and stories that can be shared and understood, even though the language may be different. The human experience still is the same. So a good example has been the rise of Korea and their success in reaching Western audiences. But a lot of that started with a big hit song about 10 years ago called Gangnam Style, which was the first billion-view video ever on YouTube. So with that one Korean song, they reached 1 billion people worldwide, and it started opening up a lot of doors. So a lot of what has to be looked at is how the Thai cultures are the Thai culture and Thai producers are going to start reaching and finding an audience for their product via these avenues of YouTube and TikTok and social media influencers that then lead into things like streaming, Netflix, Amazon content, and some of these other producers that are doing non-theatrical content, which then leads into theatrical content. So what I wanted to do was do a kind of brief overview of the history of Asian culture influence in the West. So basically, when we're talking about tailoring Thai culture IP to the world, if we look at the success stories that have already happened, there's basically, we'll cover 3 countries: Japan, China, and Korea. Now, Japan was probably one of the first to really start affecting Western culture, and it started in the 50s with filmmakers like Akira Kurosawa, who were making world-class feature films that were then discovered by the US audiences. Then in the 60s, you also had the horror films, the Japanese horror films, like Godzilla. In the 60s, you had the animation industry in Japan starting to purposely try and become a part of the television animation industry in the United States. And that started with Astro Boy and Simba. And then during that period in the 60s, then you had Hong Kong cinema, which had been around for a long time in Hong Kong. The martial arts interest started to pick it up, and thanks to Bruce Lee, who really opened up that door in the 60s and 70s, it blew open the door for martial arts film from Asia to really become popular in the West and have a big influence on how films are made ever since. And in the 80s and 90s, you started to have Korea starting to be a part of the animation industry, but then through their, and probably more recently through their dramas, have really had a major effect on content globally, as well as the K-pop, the K-pop phenomenon and things like that. So one of the first Japanese collaborations, if you will, would be The Seventh Samurai by Akira Kurosawa was made into a Magnificent Seven, and where they translated a traditional Japanese story based on samurai into a very American story based on cowboys. So this is a good example of how we're taking IP from one culture and translating it over into another culture with really good effect. With the Godzilla movies, those ended up starting out very simple, but they ended up becoming part of television movies that were played constantly in the United States in the 60s and 70s in reruns, and became very popular, and it just grew the franchise. So there's another very unique Japanese cultural type of content that then became more and more popular in the Western, until now it's a mainstream Western franchise. As I mentioned earlier, we had the animation. Japanese has a very strong anime and animation background and history. So they started with the television animation, producing shows for kids and stuff like that. And by the 70s and 80s, they pretty much dominated the animation culture in the United States television. What also helped was the video game industry. On top of that, they were able to take a lot of their video game titles, like I just watched the movie, Sonic the Hedgehog from Sega. That's now a franchise for the major studios now. So again, taking their IP and making it work in a Western audience through television and through different channels. Not necessarily a mainstream approach trying to sell a big feature film, but going in backdoor on the smaller markets to be able to gain a foothold over time. The other success story with Japan was taking culturally their concept of a ghost story. Western ghosts were not like Asian ghosts in historically. Our ghosts were much more passive, whereas in the Japanese tradition, which is a very old tradition, the ghosts are much more aggressive. And the tradition of Japanese ghost stories goes back almost 200 years. And a lot of the kabuki theater arose from the telling of a lot of these tales. And the movie The Ring, which was one of the leading movies that spawned the whole Japanese horror genre, was the character of the girl in the well is actually a very old Japanese ghost character, one of the 5 main ghosts in Japanese stories. And what they did was they modernized it by putting that ghost into a video and then coming out of the screen, and made it a completely modern story. But traditionally, that ghost character, the girl in the well, was a very Japanese character. So here's another example of how an Asian culture was able to bring their stories into the Western media. With China, you had the Shaw brothers, and then after them, the Golden Harvest, who made all these huge amount of film. They had huge studios, complete backlots. All this was for Chinese audience. But when Bruce Lee came along and internationalized the whole genre, it just blew up from there. And he became an international star, of course, tragically died too young. But he felt that, there was value in the Chinese cultures and traditions, even to bring to American audiences. And in that vein, then you had Jackie Chan, who kind of took over his mantle and became the international action star. And then he had to do his own identity, his own twist, and he was very much influenced by old American silent film stars like Buster Keaton, and he interpreted their physical humor into his style of martial arts that became very, very popular. So here's a mixing of Western and Eastern styles that worked really well and became very popular. So another example of a success story of taking an Asian culture and making it available to an international audience. The one that became very surprise hit was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. in China, this was not considered any special story. It was a very just traditional story. But for Western audiences, this was such a beautiful, dramatic story about two people who really loved each other, told in this beautiful, sweeping fashion across, these incredible landscapes. It was a great way to introduce a Chinese story and art and culture into the West, and it was very, very successful at doing that. So there is a point where the Western audiences will become open to your traditional type of content if it's presented in a way that universally everybody can understand from a story standpoint. Now, this brings us up to Korea, which has the last couple of years have begun to really dominate feature films, starting with this director, Park Chan-wook, who did Old Boy, and he has really established himself as a world-class director. Same way with stories like The Handmaiden. Again, another one of his films. Now, these films are dramas and thrillers, but they also have very dark, modern storylines behind them, including incest and rape and issues with homosexuality and all of these different layers that go on top of the traditional story that you think you're being told, but they're very challenging from a dramatic standpoint. And this is the thing that Korea has been able to do, was take these dramas and bring them to the world that the people respond to it. And it's not like, it's not an action thing. It's not a horror thing. Like, they do horror very well as that, but it's a human thing, a very human character driven stories, which have led to the success stories like Squid Games, which this kind of came out of nowhere, but it is such a huge hit, and it resonated so much with audiences because of the people and the story, and everybody could relate to what they were going through. These are very modern stories. And this is the contribution Korea has made to cinema. And finally, with Parasite, which won an Academy Award, I mean, they're doing the most amazing filmmaking based on high quality drama standards, and that Western audiences are completely resonating with and completely enjoying and consuming. So that leads us to the area of what type of IP, what content do we want to make? The genres that travel will always be horror and action. They'll always find an audience. A good horror film, a good action film, there always will work. Universal themes that cross over different cultures, those are things we have to look at. Compelling stories. What are the stories in Thailand that just have to be told? What are the things that are going on there, within the culture or within the international culture? I mean, Thailand is no longer just a small country. I mean, it's one of the leading agricultural exporters in the world. They're one of the leading manufacturing countries in the world. They're one of the leading, becoming one of the leading IT and tech companies. They're positioned for that. You're centered in the middle of the largest population density between India, China, and Malaysia. You're right in the middle. You're the media capital of Southeast Asia. There's a lot of things there and a lot of stories that need to be told. And what are those stories that the rest of the world wants to hear? So as far as horror, Thailand has a very strong cultural interest in ghosts and the spiritual aspects of the world. There's a lot of stories, I think, for ghost stories and horror stories that Thailand can look to exploit. And I believe there are some films that have already been done that have been very well received. Action films, Tony Jaa became an international star with Ong Bak. That opened up the door to a lot of different, more action type films. Thai culture has its own style. Muay Thai has its own style. How do you leverage that into good, compelling stories and action stories that the audience wants to see globally? Those are things that travel well. Thailand has a strong compassion for tolerance for those who are different. And that's very important these days. There's a lot of stories being made regarding, people on the fringe of society who are just trying to be taken equally as everybody else. So we're looking at a lot of different types of stories that can translate and be related to across multiple cultures of people feeling disenfranchised, or people feeling that they're not being taken care of by their family, by their government, by society in general. Also, Thailand has a very strong value for the family. So there's a lot of strong stories to be told, compelling stories about the family values in Thailand, and how important that is to them. And with Thailand now becoming, the center of economic growth in Southeast Asia, there's also many international businesses there, which always bring in potential corporate crime stories, intrigue on the corporate level, criminal activity among business people, any potential gang issues, things like that. So there's a lot of compelling stories that can be derived from within Thailand that can travel outside and be related to by other cultures. Now, what are the current trends? How do you break through some of this? Well, one of the big current trends right now, especially for young people, are called webtoons. And this started pretty much in Korea initially, but now the webtoons are little graphic novels that have huge, huge followings. We're talking millions of people a day are reading these, and they can be introduced into a web platform and reach an audience, and it can be discovered whether or not there's an audience there. And now a lot of these webtoons are being made into TV shows. They're making an animated series. Sony has a deal with Crunchyroll. Webtoons.com has a deal with Crunchyroll to produce several of their webtoons into animated shows. So this is one of the ways to get, ideas and content and stories, especially for the youth-oriented people, out of Thailand into the international markets. The other area that is being heavily drawn upon are video games. Many of the video games are being developed into full-on TV series and feature films, and it's been done in the past with some limited success, but the last couple of years they're becoming very, very successful at doing this, especially on Netflix, where you have Witcher, Castlevania, and Arcane. The most recent one was Arcane. So video games are definitely an area to look at for current trends of content and IP. Animation is still very hot. I'm aware of, several years ago, Kantana had produced the first feature animation in Thailand, Conclue, which was a very, very great story that was done pretty well for the first effort of doing animation. So I think there are more opportunities. There's very good animation studios in Thailand, and more opportunities to start creating content, animated content that can reach audiences around the world. And that's an example of animation where it has to be stylized for a European audience, not just an Eastern audience. So there are very different style cues and very different ways that is those are produced. And lastly, it's pre-branded IP like books and TV shows. A lot of times there's TV shows that can be converted into a movie or a story. I mean, a lot of what Korea has done is based on their soap operas. They do some of the best soap operas in the world. So that's why they're producing world-class drama feature films that are winning awards around the world and gaining audience. Books, even with China, there's a novel that was very popular in China called The Three Body Problem, which has been picked up in the US and is being made into, I believe, a feature film at this point. So there's all different types of content and IP that has to be considered as ways to get the Thai stories to the rest of the world. So in summary, what's really needed is Thailand needs to keep developing their talented filmmakers. They need to give them opportunities to make the films. They need to give them the resources to make films that can be seen by an international audience. They need to support them telling Thai stories and getting those out, outside of Thailand. Focus on compelling stories. It all boils down to that. You got to have a good, compelling story. Find the Thai values that transcend culture. What is it about Thailand that the rest of the world really needs to know about and really wants to be interested in? And then start creating audiences through all these new channels between streaming online, the social media people, all the different types of ways that people are consuming content now, where you need to be feeding these stories into these channels, and then become very active in the international community. You need to be submitting films to the international film festivals, getting recognition at the international film festivals, trying to support your talented filmmakers on the international stage in order to, let the world see what Thailand has to offer. And then from there, I mean, this is not going to be an overnight, it won't happen overnight. It's going to be a long, I think, determined effort in order to get long-term results, but it's worth it as you see the success stories between Japan and China and Korea, how successful they've become at influencing and being a part of Western media now. You can't have Western movies now without Japanese, Chinese, or Korean influence. It just doesn't happen anymore. So that's pretty much what I have to say at this point. So if you want to ask questions.
All right, so next up is our Q&A sessions. So for those of you who have questions or comments, you can type them in online, and then our staff members will relay it back to me. So any staff members at the moment, do you have questions from our online viewers? ทีมงานเรามีคำถามจากผู้ชมทางบ้านไหมครับ? I'm sure Mr. Thomas Polson would be more than happy to answer. He's talked about many things, such as the intellectual property that had success in Japan, in China, and also introducing those cultural aspects and basically disseminating it across the US, such as Godzilla, The Ring, and things like that. Okay, so could you touch upon, you talked about Thailand should think about the stories that need to be told to the world. In your opinion and in your experience with Thailand, what aspects of the Thai culture would interest America?
The one thing that caught me was, the strength of the family there, how important family is.
Family?
One of my favorite Thai films is Chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
The movie Chocolate, and that's about the girl who learns, she's autistic and learns martial arts by watching On Bak. and her mother becomes ill with cancer, and the children are worried, so they start collecting her mother's debts from all the people. Her mother was a collector for the mafia, for the Yakuza. So the kids don't know this. Out of their innocence and their love for their mother, they go start collecting the debts. And because she had learned the martial arts from Ong Bak, she's able to enforce the collection, you know? But it's that pure soul of the children whose love for their mother, you know, you see that in Thailand, that just that almost innocent, you know, it's my mother, I need to help her. We need to help somebody. We need to help people. You know, that's one aspect of, I think, Thai culture that we need a lot of in this world today.
What about martial arts in Thailand? Because Ong Bak is a very famous movie. However, perhaps we could have more of Thai martial arts in Hollywood.
Oh, definitely.
What do you think of that?
Well, somebody asked me, what do I think the action story is still popular for? Do you think the action story, Thai action story, is still popular for the world audience? And I think so. I think it is, because the Thai fighters have their own style. I mean, when I first saw Ong Bak, I couldn't believe what Tony Jaa was doing.
Well, he's actually doing that on his own.
Yeah.
He
and
has
you're
no
looking at it
stuntmen.
going, how's he doing that, you know? And it was exciting. I think the problem with, you know, I don't want to be critical, but as they did more versions of Ong Bak, you know, the sequels, it became more and more Thai, very Thai-oriented stories.
Okay.
And by Ong Bak 4, a Thai audience, I'm sure, really understood and felt with it, but an international audience wouldn't not relate to it so much.
Okay, so you are touching upon the cultural aspects and differences in screenwriting that audience need to somehow identify with.
Right. But as far as the martial arts, you know, Muay Thai is still very well known here, and you know, there's a lot of things that can be done with it, I'm sure, as a genre, and that's what you need your filmmakers there to explore that and look at that aspect. Even if it's just a martial arts film about a young kid from Chiang Mai who's trying to take care of his family, so he has to go to learn how to become a Muay Thai fighter and take care of his family, you know, and the struggles and he has to go through doing that, you know, and overcoming those difficulties.
Well, one audience member asked about Thai documentaries. What do you think of this? Thai documentaries, maybe something.
You know, last time I was in Thailand on television, there was a great show about the hosts of the show were young people, and they were biking through Thailand. That was wonderful. It was one of the best shows I've ever seen. They were biking through different areas of Thailand and showing off the beauty of those areas and stuff like that.
Okay.
Sure. Definitely, there should be more documentaries.
So this could be sort of considered the soft power of using movies and films to showcase the beauty of Thailand, whether it be the north, the south, the northeast, or...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Thailand's national parks are just unbelievable. Okay. And I understand they have an underwater national park.
From your experience, somebody asked from the audience, from your experience, what do you think are the key success factors for creating your own intellectual property? What are the key successes?
Well, you know, you want to tell a story that you want to tell something original. You want to try and be original and tell a unique story from a unique perspective. You don't want to just try and copy somebody else's story, but you want to find that story that's going to be unique and that has an appeal across multiple people, you know, that's going to reach a larger group of people. And that's when that kind of goes back to having the more universal themes of you know, a good example is Squid Games.
Squid Games.
Why was Squid Games so popular? It's the most popular thing ever on Netflix in the United States. Why? It's not even in English. It's because
Exactly.
it's because the people in the story are going through economic hardships like a lot of people in a lot of parts of the world in the United States, and they can relate to it. They can relate the struggle that they're having, you know, trying to make ends meet or just trying to financially stay afloat, you know, in a modern society. And that really resonated with a lot of people.
All right, so you're emphasizing on the extreme importance of the storyline and how to tell your story, an original story, a story that nobody has ever seen before, but a very interesting story, not like any other, whereas it could be in a complete foreign language, but still people in the United States and people around the world can relate to. So the storyline is very important to you and very important to the intellectual property aspect
exactly.
as well.
Exactly. Squid Games is so original. I mean, it's the premise is so out. It's so out of mind. It's so mental that you have this game where people are willing to bet their lives just for the money. Just, you know, that's so crazy. But that just shows how, you know, these normal people really are pushed to extremes because of the situation that life has put them in.
Okay. So very, very important for the storyline as well. Another question from the audience member, Mr. Polson. What kind of genre do you think is suitable for Thailand's culture, whether it be maybe the Thai food or interesting festivals or cultural aspects in Thailand? What do you think the world would relate to
Well,
when they see Thailand?
You know, I hadn't, you know, that's a good question because, you know, we talk about the genres that, you know, from Hollywood standpoint, we know sell, which is horror, action. You know, those are not expensive to produce. They're usually easy to sell, and you can make some money on them. But when you get into like the food, like the Thai cultural food, that's a whole nother story. I mean, you could be doing. I mean, out of Spain, a long time ago, there was a movie called Chocolat. And you find some of these in the European films where they build stories around food and cuisine and the idea of cooking and for other people and you know, taking care of other people through food. I mean, those are definitely stories that could be told in Thailand and about Thai culture because you know, the food there is amazing.
Well, that'll make more and more foreigners akin and then more familiar with the Thai cultural and cuisine rather than just pad Thai. Maybe we will have some Penang, or maybe we'll have some lap, or maybe some som tam, rather than just pad Thai.
Yeah.
So something for film producers can think about when they're writing their stories, or a very interesting festival, local festival that the world has probably never ever seen before. They can put this in their movies as well. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, you know, a lot of these things can be settings. They might not be the whole. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. One, the festival, you could do a movie about the meaning of the festival. You know, between characters. Maybe you have a couple of young lovers, and somehow they're having problems, and the festival brings them back together, or family members are having problems, and somehow, you know, they go through these trials and tribulations and they're not getting along, but you know, the festival may be the one thing that finally makes them realize that they need to be together. Or in the case of there was a movie called I believe it was Tampopo, which was a Japanese film, and it was all about a noodle chef trying to make the perfect noodle. You know, his quest to make the perfect noodle. For his customers, well, you know, things like that.
Talking about storytelling, one of our audience members asked, he or she is probably somebody writing a screenplay or a storyline. They're asking how to make that particular storyline more interesting rather than just a boring storyline. What can you advise in that aspect?
Conflict. Usually you need to have some conflict in there, some reason for it to not work, for there to be problems.
So
And
the
then-
daily struggles of the characters in the movie.
It's always about conflict and resolution of conflict.
Okay, that's very interesting. So something about
Now-
conflict.
One thing to consider too is the Western filmmaking has a very structured style of writing films. And a lot of times the Asian style tends to be much more meandering
Okay.
and much not as structured. And that sometimes can be a problem for when you're trying to go to a foreign audience. It helps to have more of that Western type of structure within the stories. Otherwise, Western audiences can kind of get lost because
less,
they don't.
what you're saying is less hidden meanings behind cultural aspects of Thailand, something that Westerners or foreigners can see and understand right away, rather than putting in subtexts that probably only the Thai audience understands.
That's true. That's a good point. But what I would say, though, is that subtext is universal subtext, then you might want to try and keep that in there. If
Okay.
it's a specific Thai cultural thing that they, the West, nobody won't know that reference to that particular event. Like Rama the Fifth, correct me if I'm wrong, was one of your past kings, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Most Westerners are not going to know anything about Rama the Fifth.
Okay, so you have
Unless you
to
do a movie
sort
about
of create, I don't know, maybe possibly a 1 or 2 minute scene about who he is, who is the character that is in the film that you are speaking of, just to get a sort of short and brief background.
Yeah, or depending on the story. I mean, it could be, maybe there's Rama the Fifth was famous and well-known character and had qualities that people admire to this day. So maybe you have a story about a little boy who learns about Rama the Fifth in school, and then in life, he goes through life dealing with his other classmates, and he has to fall on those characters' qualities he learned from learning about Rama the Fifth to resolve a conflict he's having with his friends or his bullies or enemies.
Okay, very interesting.
So there's
aspect.
ways, there's ways to try and introduce those types of subtext, but it has to be clear to the Western audience is not going to get the references.
Okay. So basically just making it more straightforward, less thinking and less hidden meanings. So making it as straightforward and easy to understand as possible. Mr. Polson, is there anything you would like to add to our Thai audience and movie producers, movie directors, or anybody viewing right now? Is there anything that you would like to add to the Thai audience?
I think you have to study, you just have to study film. You have to study the whole of film, international film, Japanese cinema, Italian cinema, Western, American cinema, Korean cinema, Indian cinema. You have to become a student of all these different filmmakers from around the world and then find a style that represents Thailand. But don't be afraid to draw on all these great other filmmakers that have come before from other countries and learn what they did. And that's what happens a lot in Hollywood. I mean, Quentin Tarantino basically went and took from a lot of different directors who were not American directors.
Well, he's basically an encyclopedia of films. He used to work in a video shop, if I remember correctly, and he has like a encyclopedic memory of all these films that he's seen.
Yes. Yes. And audiences can relate to a lot of what he does because of that.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you so much, Thomas Polson. Thank you again, Executive Post and Visual Effects Producer. We have many things we can learn from Mr. Polson, and I hope the Thai audience, the Thai movie directors, and also producers, and also people working in the media industry has benefited from his session.